Next, we're going to take a look at the diplomacy that's ongoing, well, right now, actually. In the past week, we have seen a number of world leaders head to Israel to offer support and try to de-escalate the crisis. Today, it was Emmanuel Macron of France. Here he is, as you can see, next to Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He expressed solidarity with Israel, says the first objective of the war should be to free all hostages. And he says it was Israel's duty to fight against Hamas, but he warned against enlarging the conflict. Let's take a listen.
I consider that this is an international coalition in order to fight against these terrorist groups that we have to build. I just reminded my people in my language what we discussed about fight against terrorism, humanitarian action, rules to be respected, but as well political process. And obviously I warned against any escalation, and I warned Hezbollah and some other regimes not to be part of what's happening. I know how committed you are. Let me express once again my solidarity, my friendship, and the fact that France stands with you.
So, international diplomacy in Israel. Also in New York too. A meeting of the UN Security Council is underway. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres condemned the Hamas attacks and said he was deeply concerned about what he described as clear violations of international humanitarian law in Gaza. He said even war has rules and that the Hamas attack on October the 7th did not take place in a vacuum.
Nothing can justify the deliberate killing, injuring and kidnapping of civilians or the launching of rockets against civilian targets. All hostages must be treated humanely and released immediately and without conditions. It is important to also recognize the attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum. The Palestinian people have been subjected to 56 years of suffocating occupation.
Well, the Israeli Foreign Minister was not impressed with the Secretary General's comments. Take a listen.
These kids witness horror which cannot be described by word. Mr. Secretary General, in what world do you live? Definitely, this is not our world. This is a terrorist of Hamas. What he said in there in Arabs, he telling to his mother and fathers that he is proud that he has blood of 10 Jewish that he murdered. What monster they gave a birth to. Secretary General, this is the world that we live.
Foreign Minister Eli Cohen there. And in the last hour, we have heard that he has also cancelled a planned meeting with Secretary General Guterres that was scheduled for this evening. We also heard from the top Palestinian Authority diplomat.
The ongoing massacres being deliberately and systematically and savagely perpetrated by Israel, the occupying power, against the Palestinian civilian population under its illegal occupation must be stopped. The Security Council has a duty to stop them. The international community is obliged under international law to stop them. It is our collective human duty to stop them. Now, continued failure at this council is inexcusable.
And let's take you live to New York to show you that the meeting is still ongoing. We are keeping our eyes and ears across it. Whilst we do that, let's speak to Lieutenant General Mark Schwartz, former US Security Coordinator for Israel and the Palestinian Authority, who is now with the RAND Corporation, an American non-profit organization. Thank you very much for coming on the program.
Thank you, Lewis. It's good to be with you.
Can I just get your reaction, first of all, just to the diplomacy and the words we've heard from around that table this afternoon?
Well, I think there are two realities. Certainly the reality that, from October 7th and what the families of the victims of that horrific terrorist attack and the subsequent kidnapping of 200 Israelis that are still being held by Hamas, but there's also the reality of the Palestinian people. And I think it's accurate and important to highlight what is happening inside of Gaza, specifically with the impact of the ongoing air interdiction campaign for preparation for the ground offensive. And as important, but not spoken a lot about, are the ongoing confrontations that are occurring between the Israeli security forces in the West Bank, settlers, provocations by settlers in the West Bank, and the violence that's ensued over the course of, certainly well before October 7th, but in earnest now since the October 7th terrorist attack.
And I want to bring in the role of the US here. What, in your eyes, is the role? What is it in practice in relation to its strong allied relationship with Israel? And what do you think it ought to be trying to do?
Well, certainly, as we know, they're our strongest ally in the region, and we're giving unequivocal support to the Israeli government, certainly to the military, to include the recent deployment of not only the two carrier strike groups, but also senior military advisors to share our lessons that we experienced in Iraq, both in the initial invasion in Fallujah and then subsequent to the liberation of Mosul from ISIS. So very important, but also what we're doing to emphasize the importance of alleviating the humanitarian suffering that's ongoing in Gaza as well as the West Bank. Not well known, but the U.S. has historically been the largest single donor to support the Palestinian people from both humanitarian assistance as well as security assistance in the West Bank. So I think it's important that we continue to emphasize the rules of law as it comes to warfare, but also to do all we can in speaking with Israel, certainly, but also the broader international community to alleviate the humanitarian suffering that's occurring in Gaza specifically.
And there have been reports in US media that the Biden administration has been urging Israel to delay any ground incursion into Gaza. More time for hostage negotiations is the presumption. Do you think that is happening or ought to be happening?
There's certainly dialogue occurring while there's ongoing discussions and negotiations, and we've seen, as you just reported, the release now of 4 hostages, 2 American and 2 Israeli, and ideally there will be many more in the coming days. So I do think while dialogue is ongoing, it's important that the ground offensive does not commence, because once that occurs, I believe any type of dialogue with Hamas with respect to releasing of the hostages will cease. I think also what's occurring behind the scenes is the discussion of the strategic objective beyond just eliminating the Hamas military capability and the political structure of Hamas, but also what is Gaza going to look like in the Palestinians subsequent to this land will take place.
Lieutenant General Mark Schwartz, thank you very much for your time. We are right out of time, but appreciate your analysis. Thank you. I'm Lewis Vaughan-Jones. This is BBC News.